Well, it's been a little while since I've talked about another animated Disney classic, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, I wasn't looking forward to this one. The Rescuers. Now, The Rescuers came out in 1977. That's right, the same year as Winnie the Pooh. And while Winnie the Pooh was more or less a collection of shorts that were already produced back when Walt was alive, and they just kind of packaged them up, added a little bit of new animation to tie it together. The Rescuers, on the other hand, is entirely fresh production. It's not based on anything that Disney's already produced. It's a new concept, new storyline. Granted, it is based on a book series, so it's not entirely original. But as far as new animation goes, this is really it for 1977. And this one, at least for the most part, is original animation created specifically for this movie. But that still doesn't mean Disney wasn't still cutting corners where they could. This movie has a lot of corner cutting involved. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the opening section of this movie. The movie opens with this little girl, Penny, being captured. You see her all by herself, sending a message in a bottle. And then as the opening credits roll, we get this very sleepy, melancholic Carol Connors tune accompanying storyboard. This movie doesn't even have a fully animated opening section. This is just storyboards, images, background art of this message in a bottle. And you got a bunch of admittedly pretty beautiful paintings being shown in sequence, but that's not really animation, and it does look kind of cheap. And if this wasn't a Disney production, I really wouldn't care. But this is Disney we're talking about, the kings of animation. They're known for their animation quality, and this movie just isn't showcasing that. But then when we do get some fresh animation, we're introduced to the Rescue Aid Society, which is this small organization of mice that live underneath the UN building in New York City. And it's here where we see even more corner cut. Because while it is cool to see New York City in animated fashion, seeing it rotoscoped and seeing all the human characters clearly rotoscoped and got that kind of halo glow effect that rotoscoping gives, where it's not entirely convincing. It almost looks like a Ralph Bakshi production where they just painted over live action footage and it just looks real sloppy. And again, this is something that would have never flown in Walt Disney's day. Of course, he wasn't above rotoscoping on principle. That was always used for reference or to inspire the artist. They would never directly Xerox and paint over the already existing live action footage and just call it a day. But unfortunately, that is the state that we find Disney in the 70s at this time. They're just corner cutting wherever they can, trying to save money. And unfortunately, the animation quality really does suffer. And this is probably the first Disney movie, now that we're into like the dark age of Disney animation after Walt died. Some people call it the Bronze Age before the dark age really happens, but really, whatever you call it, I do think The Rescuers is that turning point where it stops being the Bronze Age and starts being the Dark Age. And I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I'm not a fan of The Rescuers. Rescuers Down Under we'll talk about when we get to it, but the original Rescuers, I'm not a fan. I don't like it. I never liked it as a kid. It was a movie that my grandmother had at her house that we put on every once in a while and be amused for a couple hours because of the cute mice. But it was never one of my favorites or go-tos. I would just watch it when I had already gone through all the other movies in the library and I was like, oh, it's been a while since I've seen The Rescuers. Maybe it's better than I remember. And every time I would put it in, and even putting it in and watching it now, it's really not any better than I remember it. It's boring, it's low energy, it's surprisingly depressing and dark for a Disney movie. And on top of that, the animation quality is just notably lazy and sloppy. And if you've been following along with this series, you know that I've been commenting more and more on the deteriorating quality of the animation over the last like 3 or 4 movies that I've talked about. This is the first one where it's not even a matter of the Xerox process ruining it, because I know that that's really a matter of taste. Some people find the Xerox process really distracting and really annoying to look at, and other people don't even care. They don't even notice. And that's fine, but The Rescuers doesn't even look like that. With The Rescuers, there's so much unfinished rotoscoping with the human characters, and even the characters that aren't rotoscoped, like Bianca and Bernard, our 2 mice leads in the movie, are so generic and minimal as far as character design that you really forget about them whenever they're not on screen. And then there's Penny, and Penny, aside from some dodgy rotoscoping once in a while, for the most part she's animated okay, because she's this cartoony, innocent little girl who's just so precious in the way she speaks and the way she carries on, and is so sad most of the time. They just can't help but fall in love with her, to empathize with her. And while she does generate a certain amount of sympathy because of her predicament, and she's kidnapped and she's forced to go into this well to retrieve a diamond for a Cruella de Vil stand-in who I haven't even gotten to yet. The only other thing I can say about Penny is that she almost doesn't even feel like a Disney character, because Disney characters and Disney protagonists, and especially their female protagonists, even up until this point, where we're not even in the Disney Renaissance yet, of female leads that just ooze personality and charisma, like Belle, Ariel, or Jasmine. But you look back on Aurora, Cinderella, Snow White, and even Maid Marian and Robin Hood, they still had a certain amount of charm and personality where you do remember them. You are able to separate their personalities. Penny is not that. She almost feels like a Care Bears protagonist than a Disney protagonist. She's just so generic and cutesy and forgettable that honestly, after I'm done recording this video, I'm probably not even going to remember her name is Penny. But as generic as she is, and as generic as Bernard and Bianca are, and those being our main characters, that's kind of a big deal. It is almost made up for in the character of Madame Medusa. And with her, I kind of have some mixed opinions, because on the one hand, I do like her design. I like her larger-than-life attitude. It definitely feels reminiscent of someone like Maleficent or Cruella de Vil or the Evil Queen. That has that energy to it. And on top of that, our two pet alligators, Brutus and Nero, are memorable henchmen characters that do a lot of the heavy lifting in this story. But at the end of the day, her character and her mannerisms and even her accent, it just feels a little too reminiscent of Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. And Cruella de Vil is a fantastic villain, works so well in that movie that she's in. I couldn't help but think that maybe she was originally intended to be the villain in The Rescuers and ended up turning her into Madame Medusa as kind of like an alternate skin to put on the same broadly designed character. And looking at it from that perspective, it would have been cool to see Cruella de Vil return in this movie, a movie that is not 101 Dalmatians, to make her this recurring character that could pop up in any old movie. She might have been able to save this movie from feeling so mediocre and run-of-the-mill. But on the other hand, I do like the Louisiana bayou, deep backwoods atmosphere that this movie has. I think that part of it is a winner, and it's something that I think a movie like The Princess and the Frog expanded on and developed even further. But looking at it here, it is kind of a unique and different environment that no Disney movie up until this point has really explored. By having Madame Medusa be her own character and having that whole Devil's Bayou setting, it does give this movie a little bit more of its own identity and something that I can at least take away from this movie remembering. However, I feel like there's still a little too much Cruella in Madame Medusa's accent and her voice, that if they scrapped that posh British aristocrat voice that Cruella de Vil has and gave her something a little more southern, I feel like that would have really pushed this character over the edge and made her super memorable like Cruella de Vil without having it feel like a Cruella de Vil palette swap. As far as the story goes, you know exactly where this story is gonna go from the first inciting incident. Once you know that they found the message in the bottle, you know that the two mice are going to go to Devil's Bayou. They're going to try to stage some rescue attempt and they're going to get her back, and it goes down pretty much as you would expect for a Disney animated movie with mice trying to rescue a human. And when the climax does go down and, you know, the rescue's happening and everything's going haywire, everyone's chasing each other, and you have all these little redneck mice and rodents leading the charge, it does pick up. The energy does elevate to something pretty entertaining compared to the very slow and melancholy first 2/3 of this movie that just feel like it dragged on. But at the same time, there is something about this climax that did remind me of the similar sequence in The Little Mermaid when all the animals are attacking Ursula in disguise at the wedding. And I just couldn't help but think that that one had so much more energy and such better comedic timing and little character moments that I can still picture in my head right now. And the version in The Rescuers just didn't have that, at least not to that degree. So at the end of the day, it just kind of falls flat, and that's basically how I feel about the whole movie. This is nowhere close to being one of my favorite Disney movies. It may be my least favorite one so far. I'm not a fan of this one. Even though some of the moments with the villains are entertaining and it's not all bad, there's really not a lot of redeeming qualities in this movie. It's mostly just pretty slow and boring. It's sloppily animated. And when I think back of all the Disney movies that I've reviewed so far, even the ones that I've said that I don't like particularly, like Dumbo or Pinocchio or even Fantasia to a certain degree, I still acknowledge that artistically those are some serious achievements in animation and storytelling, and in the case of Fantasia, just being that avant-garde art piece that Walt Disney wanted to showcase classical music in a new way. You can at least appreciate it on those terms. And even some of the lesser movies after Walt's death that I've reviewed still have a certain amount of fun and personality and charm to them. I can't think of any jokes in this movie that really landed with me that I was like, oh yeah, that's a good line. And aside from one catchy song that is the Rescue Aid Society anthem, that song weirdly enough has been stuck in my head for the past few days. None of the other songs stick in the slightest because it's all just generic Carol Connors 70s ballad songs that just go in one ear and out the other. There's nothing of substance to it. It definitely doesn't have that Sherman Brothers touch that got me through the last few movies. And that's really all I have to say about The Rescuers. It's probably my least favorite Disney movie to date. We'll see how bad things get as we continue to trudge through the dark age of Disney, but this movie is just so depressing and melancholy and low energy and low effort that the quicker I move on from this movie and just forget it even exists, the better. But I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about The Rescuers? Is it a movie that you like? Do you have fond childhood memories with it? But whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.